Hey guys, what's up? MadSeason here, back with another episode in the Hardest Grind series. It's been a while since we talked, hasn't it? In fact, I think it was last year. Phew. Anyways, I got another video ready for you. This is the third in the series where I talk about some of the more hardcore grinds that have been in the game. The first one I'd like to talk about in this episode is an achievement. It's the meta achievement for fishing, and that's the Accomplished Angler. This is like the holy grail for all of the anglers out there because if you complete it, you get the salty title as a reward, which is one of the more rare titles in the game. Allow me to explain why. This meta achievement needs 14 achievements total, all fishing related of course. Some of them are pretty simple and straightforward, such as just fishing from schools, but there are a few here and there that are just huge pains in the butt. The bigger ones being the Coin Master, Mr. Pinchy's Magical Crawdad Box, and the Master Angler of Azeroth. If you're noticing some of the dates here, you'll see that I started going for these in 2008 and have just recently completed it 9 years later in 2017. How can it take so long? Well, RNG basically, and the killed motivation as a result of it. And RNG is a little tricky here because some people can be really lucky and get it really easily, and for others it can take 9 years. Let's start with the Coin Master. For this one, you need to complete 3 more achievements: a penny for your thoughts, silver in the city, and there's gold in that there fountain. This was a Wrath of the Lich King achievement that you completed in the Dalaran city. In the fountain, you could fish up various coins that gave you a bit of lore. They were split up into 3 tiers of rarity: copper, silver, and gold, with the copper being the most common and the gold being the most rare. In total, there are over 50 coins, and to get this achievement, you have to fish up every single one. You can of course fish up the same coin more than once, so it was a very RNG based thing that you could knock out in a day, a week, or more depending on how much you actually fished and how lucky you were. But that's only part of the achievement. Another big roadblock is Mr. Pinchy's Magical Crawdad Box. You work on this one in the Terakar Forest Zone in the Burning Crusade expansion. Up in the mountains, you can find Highland mixed schools, and I'm not sure about now, but initially from these, you had just a 0.2% chance per cast to get Mr. Pinchy from these pools only. Luckily, these days, unless your server is packed, there's no huge competition for these pools. Usually, you can fish them solo, but a 1 in 500 chance per cast is pretty darn rough. It would be one thing if it was in the open water and you can kind of half pay attention, but every few catches, you gotta get up and head to the next node. But that's not even the whole story. The achievement says that you need the Magical Crawdad Box, not this Mr. Pinchy item. When you use this, it grants you a wish. It'll summon a level 70 pet that'll assist you in combat for 10 minutes, or it'll give you some potions, it might give you a small health buff, summon a mob that attacks you, or as an 8% chance, it'll give you the Crawdad Box, which gives you the Magical Crawdad pet and the achievement. You get just 3 chances per Mr. Pinchy, plus initially, you could only use a wish once every 2 days. Today, the timer is much shorter at 4 hours. So, in summary, we have a 1 in 500 chance to fish up an item, only obtainable from a specific type of fishing pool, that gives you an item that gives you 3 8% shots at the achievement. So, it's some nice RNG layered on top of RNG with a 2-day timer initially. But remember, we're talking about the Accomplished Angler achievement still, which requires many other achievements. And there's one more that some would argue is even tougher than Mr. Pinchy's Bullcorn quest, and that's the Master Angler of Azeroth. For this one, you need to win the Booty Bay fishing contest. Again, this is one you can complete in 10 minutes or 9 years, it's all luck. Every Sunday at 2 PM PST in the Stranglethorn Vale Zone, a fishing contest starts. All fishing pools within the zone will have a chance to give you a special fish called the Speckled Tasty Fish. The goal is to collect 40 of these and turn them into an NPC in the Booty Bay hub. The only catch is that you're competing against every single person in your region US, EU, or otherwise, and only the first 50 people to turn in the quest for that region get the achievement. So, out of thousands and thousands of players. Before cross-realm zoning, it was a little tougher I think because you initially needed to be the first person on your server to turn in 40. This was a little too hardcore I guess, so they changed it to the first 3 on your server, and once the realm sharing came in, they had no choice but to split everyone into their own regions, which is the system that we have today. There was also something called the Kaluak fishing tournament from the Wrath expansion that also gave the achievement, but that's been disabled since 2012. So, it's a very competitive tournament, and you need a lot of luck and persistence to be one of the first 50. Again, RNG is RNG, and some people get it on their first try, and others are still trying to get it to this day. The thing that makes it rough is that you only get 1 shot per week, and at the end of the day, it's only 1 out of 13 others for the meta achievement, and like many of the other achievements, if you don't get it, you don't get it. In episode 1, I went over the insane title in its original form and how hard that was, and as challenging and time-consuming that one is, at the end of the day, after a long day of grinding, you could always say that you at least made some progress, which is a big plus. The difference between that and the accomplished angler is that there's a lot of RNG, and depending on your luck, you can put in several hours and still make 0 progress. It's an achievement that's broken many due to this RNG nature, and one of the hardest grinds in the game. While we're talking about RNG, let's go over the original Archaeology Grind for 3 items in particular: the Ultramarine Karaji Battle Tank, the recipe for the Vial of the Sands, and the account-wide 2-handed sword, Zen Rock. When the Cataclysm expansion released, we got the Archaeology profession. For those who don't know, this is a secondary profession that lets you visit dig sites. There's a random selection of dig sites active on a continent at once, and once you complete one, another one pops up at random. From these sites, you loot what they call archaeology fragments, and you piece those together to form certain items depending on what fragments you're looting. The items you piece together are selected randomly, with the better items being more rare, as you would imagine. Some items are there just for the lore, and others are more valuable like mounts or pets. Over the years, it's gotten some nice changes. You can get more digs per dig site and more fragments per dig. Initially, a lot of the artifacts used to be vendor trash, and now you can turn them into crates, which you can then use to buy handy things such as items that teleport you right to the dig sites. The cooldown and cast time of the dig is now much shorter, and the pointer is more accurate, and you now get a little icon above your head when you're over a fragment. All of this stuff didn't exist at release, and it makes the grind much easier. These 3 items I mentioned earlier were highly sought after upon the release of the expansion, and they were also very grindy. The battle tank is the bug mount. It's a reskin of the old AQ40 mounts, except that you don't need to be within the raid to use it. It is ground only though. The Vial of the Sands recipe was sought after by alchemists because it allowed you to make what I think is the first 2-seater mount in the game, the Sandstone Drake. A big moneymaker, even to this day, because while the recipe is bind on pickup, the actual vial that you make is sellable. And the Zen Rock Sword people want for the looks since it's one of the biggest swords in the game, and back then, at the start of the expansion, it was a pretty good weapon eye level wise. Now, the problem with those first 2 was that you could only get them from the Tol'vir faction of Archaeology, which only had a few dig sites in the Uldum Zone on Kalimdor. And there are very few of these dig sites in comparison to the other ones held on the continent like Night Elf and Fossil. It's been so long that it's hard to recall, but I think it was somewhere around a 10% chance to get a Tol'vir dig site to pop. And combine that with the fewer digs per site and fewer fragments per dig just made it a nightmare. So even getting the fragments was challenging enough, but getting these items to pop up as your next solve was also extremely rare, and in the case of the Vial of the Sands recipe, this only had a chance to drop from a cache item called the Canopic Jar. I'm not sure of the actual drop chance since I only got the battle tank back then and I wasn't an alchemist, but I want to say that it was around 10 to 15-ish%. There wasn't really a way to confirm it back then. The sample size was so low since there were very few people dedicated enough to farm it out before they made it easier to get. So for this one, you're hoping for that low chance of getting the right dig site, globetrotting all around Kalimdor, hoping that you get enough fragments for your next solve, and hoping that the next one that pops up is your bug mount or your jar, and in the case of the jar, hoping that the recipe drops. And the same was true for the Zen Rock Sword. You farmed this in the Eastern Kingdoms continent though, since this was from the troll race of archaeology, and there were more troll sites on this continent. This was a little easier though, I think, because the troll sites were much more common. The thing that made those other two tough was the fact that Tol'vir sites were so darn rare. Still though, Zen Rock was also quite rare and grindy. It's one of the harder grinds that I personally did in the game, and definitely one of my proudest moments since I think I was the server second to get the battle tank. I was pretty ecstatic when I got it. I am taking suggestions for this series, so if you have any grinds in particular that you think should be on this list, feel free to let me know. But that's about it for this episode. As always, I hope you found the video interesting or entertaining. Like it if you liked it, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.
Farewell for now, mortals. We hope you enjoyed today's video. See you again soon.